Hello, everyone. Yeah, we're actually pre-recording this one, aren't we? Because we're busy being daddies next week, with everyone being off in France.
Yes, and we have our priorities, but we still wanted to be with you because we have a lot of very interesting insight to share with you, and especially since last week we found new data and new information, and all of your feedbacks also made us think about it. We keep digging the topic of talent intelligence, and some people said, "But what is talent intelligence?" And we realized that a lot of people are already doing it
Yeah,
without calling it talent
even
intelligence. Isn't that
us,
right?
even us,
Even
we
us.
we're exactly the same. And I think it's even becoming more and more apparent because we actually launched our research survey last week, and we're really pushing this at the moment. We really need everybody's help. So if you are in talent, in people or HR, we'll share the link afterwards to maybe you can help us by filling that in. But we've had 50 or so responses so far, which is a great start. And we are discovering that people don't even realize they're already doing it. They're already doing talent intelligence, but they all have similar problems. And I think one of the interesting ones that kind of like a aha moment that you and I had, Jean-Marie, was when we were talking about it, and you're like, I was doing talent intelligence like 6 years ago, weren't you? Like,
Even more, even more.
yeah.
You
Why don't you
know,
tell everyone about that? Because I think that's quite a interesting story.
yeah, but these are the crazy things. It's like even 9 years ago when we were discussing with the company I was working with, we were discussing about like where should we put our efforts in terms of offices location, where should we focus of hiring efforts, and we had like this technology specialty, like we hired a lot of Java engineers, and so we just did something very simple. We went onto LinkedIn and we checked on where between two cities we had the more people using this Java technology, and that could give us an insight. And that's already talent intelligence. That's very simple. We did the same again 6 years ago when I was working with Deezer, when we were looking to open an office in another place than the Paris headquarters, and we use the tool the same way. It's very simple. Anybody could do it.
Yeah.
It's just like, what is the main? It was not the same technology, but it's. Is there anything that all of our targets have in common? And
Yeah.
then look where we can find these common criteria.
Yeah. And I think that's it. Even one of the things that I used to do in the past, I still do it now, but it's when you're going to start looking for you say you want a finger on the pulse, right? You go to the doctors. The first thing they do is they strap you up to the machine and they get a bit of a snapshot about what's going on. And over time, they'll monitor your condition and how you are, and you can plot against a graph and stuff like that. But what I used to like to do during COVID actually was the market clearly just fell out, right? Like for hiring and stuff like that. So what I did was I actually created like a scraping method where I would go on every Monday. I would scrape five or six, it was five of the main websites where you would publish certain types of jobs, and I tracked every single Monday the number of jobs that were available. And then I would also each week remove the ones that were already published the week before. So you could start to get an idea of the total size of the market in terms of number of jobs and the total new jobs being published each week. And it was crazy because you could see the market coming back. Like I had the graph. I need to try and dig it out. It was on my old laptop, but you can see exactly where the moment the market started to get better again,
And
and it's crazy.
and would you be available like now, like looking back, to say approximately how much time of advance you had, like
At the beginning,
getting
it was, yeah,
information?
because I was learning how to use a web scraping tool and do all this stuff, and we didn't have ChatGPT that could tell you how to write a bit of Python code and then use Marmalade or whatever it is to be able to run the script. But now there are tools where you can just go in and ask. No, you can copy the URL, you can paste the URL and tell me month by month and put it into a table, how many jobs there were for this specific criteria, and it will come back with a table. So now it would go from hours to minutes to be able to record that
Yeah,
data. And you can do it retrospectively as well, which is crazy.
I agree with you. Thank you for sharing that. So from my understanding, then, there's talent intelligence with data that you have inside the company, like on your own employees. You can check on what works best, what doesn't work very well, what you can improve, what you are good at. But then there's also talent intelligence on the market. But from there, even though this name talent intelligence hasn't been used a lot, there are a lot of people who must be expert at it, because like what we described, a lot of sourcing experts are doing it. Even someone who's just looking to do a recruitment plan in advance. This is something that a lot of people are teaching to new recruiters. It's like, before you start sourcing, just, map the market. So talent intelligence is not market mapping, but market mapping is part of talent intelligence.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's it, right? I was speaking to someone the other day. I'll save the name and the full story for when I do the when we speak to him and share the story. But he was telling me that they were a big tech company in America, and they were doing competitor intelligence, right? Talent intelligence against competitors to see how they're performing, and then start to inform the way in which they can go about doing acquisition. And through the online trends, they managed to discover that a company had opened an office next to a military base in another country that was specializing in a certain topic, so they could acquire that talent to get a competitive edge. And this big company, they didn't even publish this type of information, and they were very hush hush and very quiet about this. So they tried to do it under the radar, and we were laughing. It's like it's very much like the intelligence services that you would have in the UK, where you have like GCHO, which is like all to do with GCHQ, sorry, which is all to do with the communications espionage. Then you've got MI6 and you've got James Bonds running around. Like,
Mm.
but it made me laugh, and he was like, really, like the comparison to the two is very very similar, because you're trying to gain information so that you can start to monitor patterns, right? What's the future skill set this company is going to need in 5 years' time, which can then inform the learning and development departments. And that could end up helping with your workforce planning, right? So it's this whole kind of triangle that you need to complete to make talent intelligence work. But what I like about it, and where we're approaching it from, is like the operational talent intelligence, as well as what the market is talking about, which is very much about the public facing data as well.
Yes, but and building on that, when you say operational, I'm thinking about what do we do once we have the data? Because like the example you gave, I love this kind of stories. To be honest, this kind of anecdotes. But how do? You have this information, so okay, how do you act on it? I remember back in the day when, for example, this big IT consulting agency got acquired by an even bigger company, and everybody on the French market was like, "Oh, then it means it's open bar. Lots of people are gonna be on the market for a new job," and the employees just got harassed by all the recruiters, and some of them like went to social networks to publicly saying, "Hey, please, recruiters, stop contacting us. We are happy with what's going on at the moment. It's no big issue." So it's very tricky, when you get information from the market, it's public information. If you get it early, you're like a bit excited, because it's like, hey, it's business information. And when you say it's like when you compare it to, yeah, it's information you get like a spy. Yeah,
Exactly.
you feel a bit valued in your job, and it's good that you have a business acumen, but how do you act on it? Because this can be very tricky, and I think that there should be a strategy and tools for that.
Yeah, and I think something that one of the, do you know what? I'm going to tell you one other story that he told me as well before we go into it, because this is quite cool. So they set their objective of what they were doing, and they were looking for future talent. I think this was it. And they ended up discovering through this talent intelligence project that recruitment agencies were buying the training companies. So, people who are training and learning to be developers and engineers,
Yeah,
recruitment agencies were buying these businesses so they could have a unique talent pool of
okay.
candidates.
That's
And
smart.
yeah, and they like discovered this. So it was like, oh right, so this is quite an interesting tactic, right? And what they do with that is something very, very different. But what I have got from speaking to people so far is that, first of all, from an analytics perspective, you have to define the objectives, right? So, what are the specific related questions that need answering? That's how it could be. So it could be to understand workforce composition, predicting future skills, or, as we've already spoken about, competitor analysis. Then you have to go and collect all that data.
Yeah.
You have to clean and process all that data, and then you have to analyze it, right? So you could start to identify gaps in the current workforce, or predicting that future industry needs based on the
Yes.
information you've got, or benchmarking against some of the competitors. And then you can start to use some of these statistical tools and models to give you some forecasts. And after that, that's when you have to start generating the insights, right? So this can start to inform the strategic decisions and that type of stuff. Does that make any sense?
Yes, that
Um,
does.
and
That does.
that's, I think, how it works before you then report what you found. So there's a lot of this stuff going on behind the scenes before you see the final report.
And that makes even more sense to me with my work psychologist background, because I've learned things during my studies on statistics and how you can make the data speak when it's people data, people analytics. But this is not what it's called for psychologists, but it's the same. And we have mathematical and statistical tools that are amazing. And I think that most companies are sitting on a pile of huge data that is not exploited at all, because we can make the data talk so much more than what we're doing at the moment. I am very confident that we could go to any company, even if they're not very mature on the data topic, and they don't collect a lot of it. I'm pretty sure that we could already find very cool insights that could be actionable, actionable into something useful in terms of talent acquisition.
Yeah, because you see so many companies go, we're data driven. Okay, you're data driven as a business on your product. Great. What about your people? What about the talent? All that type of stuff. I just don't think it's as advanced yet in that space, because a lot of it traditionally is HR and people and talent people haven't had to go into data. It's all about feeling and intuition and experience and the human connection. And whilst that is so important, you could be missing something if you're not going into the data. Everything should start when even someone said this to me before, even if you're a data driven business, something always starts with a feeling. Everything always starts with feeling, and then you need to go into the numbers to back up your hypothesis, right? Like or your
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
this is it. And it's not, and they're not taking that kind of they're not been really taking that kind of approach. But that really nicely goes into something that I read into your newsletter that you shared on Friday, which was about the one-on-ones. You wrote something
Yes.
about the one-on-ones. Obviously, I don't know if Deeple translated it perfectly for me.
Yeah,
It's so
because
interesting. So maybe you could just tell everyone about the.
I appreciate you translating and reading my French newsletter into English. I really thank you
Always.
for that. That's great. So yeah, I don't have time to do it both languages, but for people who are interested, there's a newsletter. You just type recruitment in French and recruitment Substack in Google, and you will find it. And where I dissect research papers and transfer them, actually, like we said, into actionable inputs for HR and TA professionals. And there's a a train of research that I've been following lastly. I found it very interesting about the one-on-one meetings, because there's a bunch of research on it that shows that we are not quite there yet, and we don't realize at all what is going on in companies. Like, for example, we've done a survey, and 3 people out of 5 prefer to have a one-on-one meeting on a weekly basis. So meeting with their manager on a weekly basis, whereas it only happens 1 time out of 5. So that means that already from the preferences that people have, there's a huge difference into what really happens. So it means that other possibilities are having once every 2 weeks, once a month. Once a month is more common than we think. It's a bit difficult. But what I found even more interesting is that when we ask the managers and the employees after the one-on-one, do they think like they feel more motivated? So we ask the employees, are you more motivated after your one-on-one with your managers? And we ask the managers, do you think that after the one-on-one you just had with your employee, they feel more motivated? So 75% of the managers say, yeah, after our weekly meeting or after just our meeting, I think that they're pumped up now, 75. So that's 3 out of 5. That's a huge number. But then you ask the employees and they're like only 58% saying, yeah, I feel motivated. It's okay.
Crazy,
So there's like this huge gap, and all these people thinking that everything is going well, whereas it isn't. So of course, the day-to-day isn't easy, and you can't you can't every time stick to the schedule. I get that, but still, just watching the data, checking the data could help. And
yeah.
I actually don't know if companies have started to measure that internally, if that's a
No,
topic that.
I think some people try and do it, but how honest are people really going to be giving that information if it's identifiable data? Do you know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
you've got 5 employees and it's so easy. I remember when I was working at 50 in Tech and when we were trying to gather some information, I think you need an absolute minimum of 50 uh, unique responses before it becomes unidentifiable,
Yeah.
until you would need to have 50 direct reports before you could even get to that.
Which is not, I mean, having 50 direct reports is not a good recommendation
No, I wouldn't
either
recommend
way.
it. I
So
agree. um
it's that in
and
forever.
and and then it and so I was speaking to one of my ex co-founders, Chantel Wilson, and she used to be she is a director of people for hospitality businesses, right? And she always talks about there's this one-on-ones that they have inside the actual restaurant, for example. They're normally done over 5 minutes over a cup of coffee in the morning when they're preparing for their shift, right? They take all the information as a manager, but the manager might not report that until they do this meeting once every quarter. So the manager has to remember the information, get it? And even if they did write everything down, it's so lagged. So they've been trying to work on that problem. How do they collect that data there and quickly? They were even talking about maybe having like devices where you could record the conversation, but they were really against that. But I think linking this to talent intelligence is how do you get that unwritten data points and unwritten bits of information that could really inform the talent development function that could then go, right, well, talent intelligence needs to go out and find this skill set, right? Or it could be that the L&D team really need to work on this particular topic to help the managers because it's not working for them. And I'm really interested in those uncapturable bits of data and how important are they, right, in the actual collection process? Because if you're only basing your information off of a few number of data points, is that enough? Are you missing extra context? So I find that fascinating.
Yes. I share your curiosity about it. And, from my understanding, the best way to do it will be to have several data points internally, but also to always compare it to the market externally, because that way you can know exactly how you stand, and you also know where to make your effort, because let's be honest, we know that the talent acquisition market only reacts when they have no other choice. We didn't talk about happiness at work before people starting to resign. We didn't talk about candidate experience before the competition in talent acquisition was too hard. I mean, I'm very happy about it, because it's good that we provide a good candidate experience. It's good that we think about people, that we are good towards people, because candidates are people like you and I. But if we look at the market, companies mostly react when they have no choice. So this means that they need to be able to focus their efforts on where they are below the market first. Before anything else, in talent acquisition, it's a competition market. I don't like saying this, it's a talent war. I don't like this idea of war, because I mean, we're not really fighting. We're trying to get better. That's not the same thing. But we have to focus on what we are doing well, what we are not doing well regarding the market as well. So we can focus. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's a really good book. I don't know if you've read it, but I love the Heath brothers, like Dan and Chip Heath. They do a
Say
bunch
that
of
again?
Dan and Chip Heath. They're very they're I believe they're American.
Okay, we'll put the reference in the
Yeah, I'll
comment.
put the reference in there. And they have a load of books that I absolutely love. But the one that I'm thinking about when you're talking is Upstream. I think it's called hang on, I'm gonna check. Upstream Thinking, Dan Chip Heath. I'll just check it. Yeah, it's called Upstream. And it the capture is how to solve problems before they occur or happen, right?
That's nice.
And their whole thing is intervet prevention's better than cure, right? And you have to start to anticipate problems and then put things in place to either reduce the impact or to prevent that ever happening, right? Because
Mhm.
it's better to do that. And I always feel like talent acquisition is all and even people ops and HR is so responsive. Like, how often do you hear about a proactive project or a proactive approach to it? I just don't. And don't get me wrong, like there probably are some people doing it out there. So
There are a few,
I'm
and
sorry for the few of you that are doing it, but the majority of
yeah,
you, it's just I don't see it in the majority because there's too much pressure. They absorb everything, say yes to everything because they feel like they've got to show their value all the time, and they don't know how to say no to stuff.
yeah. And,
Um,
and
that's a part of the
even
problem.
even with a good level of responsibility as HR people, we have to ask for a lot of a lot. We have to ask for a lot of permission. You know,
Yes,
when we want to do a new project internally. I mean, I know HR directors and directors of TA who spend like 70 or 80% of their time just doing politics so their team can work in the best possible conditions. That's the reality of some companies.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's it's just I just don't understand how we're still in that area. But that took me on to something that I was reading the other day, which was there is a I'll share the report afterwards, but basically it was a white paper and it was called Talent Intelligence: Why, What, and How, and it was a guide to commercially successful talent intelligence in a digital era. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's is what it is. And this was written by someone called Maliek Pol. I will share after. Sorry if I've pronounced it incorrectly, but they were a talent intelligence analyst at Philips. Okay.
Yep.
And they were talking. I've taken some notes, and these are the 5 top things that I took from it. And it's so good that I've got a thumbs up. So it was the strategic role of talent intelligence. So it's moved from being so it's more of a transition right? So it's starting to become like a value add service that the function can provide to the wider business, and it's really becoming a part of the overall strategy because it's really aligned with the business as well. And it's helping. Something we talk about a lot is how can we elevate talent acquisition specialists from being order takers, so people are just there to serve, to actually becoming strategic advisors. And by doing this and having talent intelligence, you're providing something they don't know, and it makes them think, oh wow, that's, I never really thought about that before. And it really does help hiring for new roles, and it's helping you hire for new roles in new skill sets that you never had before. You know, I don't know what you think about that, but I thought that was kind of a nice frame on it.
Yes, this is where the value is in our job, in
Yeah,
talent acquisition and talent development, because it's all about the people. Yes, but our role is to be able to switch between the individuality when we're with one employee, we're with one candidate, and make sure that the experience that we provide is the best possible, that we understand them. But at the same time, if we want to be able to do that, we need the right tools. And for that, we need the numbers, we need the statistics, because as every human is different, the only way that we can, bring something robust, scientific about it, and it's not a bad word, talking about science in TA, or
no,
this is we need to get the hang of it. We need more science, and so we need the numbers. And to do that, yes, we need to be able to act as an advisor to the hiring managers, to the management committee, and to candidates and employees. For that, we need the data. There's no other way. Otherwise, we are just like when we're trying to give an advice, it's just like feeling against feeling. And in our job, you've heard that, I'm sure. I've heard it a lot. Like, hey, I have a nose for it. Like, literally, people telling me that because we are working with humans, with people, we think that it's just it can be translated into
yeah,
numbers.
yeah,
And one of the things that psychology taught us is that yes, we can if we have enough data and enough
exactly.
people.
Exactly. And that's the thing, right? It's getting enough of that data to make it relevant. Um, and that comes into the next takeaway I had. Sorry, I'm looking at my screen over here. That they basically said that it's moved from just assessing the data now. So I would say it's gone from just having dashboards
Yeah,
to really analyzing it with some actionable insights, right? Like that's
yeah,
what the people are looking for. They're looking for those, yeah, but what does it actually mean? So don't just gather it all and put a little dashboard. They're starting to implement like real sophisticated analytical techniques, the same way BI works, business intelligence
yeah.
works. And that is where you'll start to get competitive advantage over your obviously over the companies you're competing with for this talent. And at the end of the day, this is going to help you build better product and services, right?
Yes, it is. And actually, there's a very good tip that we could share for people and departments who want to get a bit better at talent intelligence and at how they take decisions from their data. Is work. You mentioned a business analyst. Say work with a business analyst, work with a management controller, work with people whose job is to make sense out of the data, because these people will be able to structure it in a better way and to understand how to work on it. And for some of my best memories working on data were working with these people who were outside HR. And if they come and watch this video, thanks again for your help, because it was so important at the time. And so I cannot recommend enough to look for people. I know that these people are usually very busy, so their time is very valuable. But if you can convince one of them to give you an hour of their time from time to time, it's super useful.
No, but and this is something that I've taken away from the podcast I've been doing is that you, as a TA today and a people leader, you have to be a multifunctional TA. right? You must be able to do everything and anything, whatever comes up at you, right? It really is. You have to completely be able to context switch all the time. You must be able to work with the same way a product manager is a multifunctional role, because you have to work with so many business parts of the business. I think it's the same for a TA. And yeah, it's and this like nicely goes into the third takeaway that I put, which was if you can take what you're learning from the talent intelligence, right, and you integrate that into your wider business strategy,
Mm-hmm.
that's where you can start to provide insights that really directly impact business outcomes.
Yes.
And that is basically saying the business can take what it learns and it helps the company make more money or make better decisions, right? That's ultimately what it is doing. So you really are becoming a real strategic partner. Like there was one example. It could be like, for example, when you're, I've got, I copied a bit. It says when you're collaborating with sales and bid teams to leverage talent insights for competitive advantage, suggest a deep integration of talent strategies with business operations, right? Because then you're blending the two to have a more holistic view of everything,
Yeah.
and you will be able to make better decisions based off of that. So I really, I love that.
And so, if someone wanted to start getting involved and presenting stuff, to start to be able to give advices, how would you say they should? We can't say like you should start on this data or this KPI because it depends on the
No,
context,
no.
depends on your situation. But what tips could we share to someone who would like, to move towards this advisor position or this advisor value?
I would say start with what problem are you solving for? What's the business problem you're solving for? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Frame it. Okay. Create your problem statement. How might we do X? How might we do Y? Okay. You write it down and then reframe it all over again after you've said it to you about 1,000 times. Basic design thinking kind of approach. And then once you have that, understand what kind of metrics do you need to measure to see if that's working, like to see if that works or it doesn't work, and then understand where you can go and get those bits of information, right? And in terms of what you said about presenting it to people, the top tip that's come across every single talent intelligence person I've spoken to so far is share the information where the stakeholders live, right? That doesn't mean turning up at their house and doing Bridget Jones with a
Yeah.
story card, like, like this, and telling them that you love them. But instead, that means if they live in Excel, present it in Excel. If they live in Airtable, share it in Airtable. They like getting it via email, share it on email, right? That's the key, because if you do that, they're more likely to engage with it. So they would be the tips that I take from
That's
that.
great tips, and thank you for sharing that, John. And you know what? If you're watching this video right now, I think there's a lot of value to it. I'm not shy about it. So please do not hesitate to comment and maybe to tag some people who might be interested in
In
hearing more
hearing
about
this,
this.
yeah, exactly. One of the other things was about that. This is a really real nitty and gritty talent intelligence data now, which is how do you predict future trends with talent intelligence? So you need to understand potentially where does the business want to go in the next few years? What technology are people going to need to be able to work on that particular project? And then start to have a look at the market to see what kind of skills and new tools and skills and trends and everything that's happening, so that you can marry the two up together. Because I always remember this, because I used to do some advisory work for founders, and they would always pick the technology that they knew, right? And the next thing you know, you have a company that's taken a technical decision to use a tool or a technology that nobody uses anymore, or it's super duper expensive to hire these types of people. So that one decision to pick that tech could actually be the downfall of your business, because your talent pool goes from this to this, competitive market goes to this, you know? So, and when you start to scale that for a large organization, it's like, oh wow, okay, well, maybe we could work on this new technology that's coming in because more and more people are going to be using it. Or it could be, right, let's stick to Java because everybody uses it, but there's certain limitations. So it's, how do you predict what kind of tech's coming, and how is that going to be impacted by the business cases that you're going to be working on, right?
Yeah.
And that I find super interesting as well.
Yes, that's super interesting. And when you have the data, you can be bold and go against the trend. I mean, we are not saying that because your example is very good. I know of a few examples of companies who decided to go with a super exotic tech, and that was actually good for them in terms of TA because they managed to do something with it, and so they got super attractive to the few people in that talent pool. So yes, we're not saying it's an easy choice, but if you don't have the data, you don't know which choice you are making,
Yeah.
and that's the
Yeah.
point in talent intelligence. Is there are lots of different ways, and you were telling me that earlier, that there are lots of different ways to go towards the goals that where you want to go.
Yeah,
But
there's
you,
many right ways. That was
yeah,
it. There's many right
yeah,
ways.
that's what you said. Yeah.
If someone's going, you need to do it like this, I would say, all right, hang on a minute. Right. Chantel used to call it, right, I've got my bullshit button. This is what she used to say. He had this thing, and when they were in their exec meeting, she'd go, bullshit button. I'm calling bullshit on this now. Right. She's like, and what that means really is, are you allowed to swear on LinkedIn Lives?
Sorry, what?
Are you allowed to swear on LinkedIn Lives? Oh, just did it. We're gonna get blocked. Anyway, you have this button, right? And effectively, if someone's saying you must do it this way, like no, like why? Like the context is the most important thing. What works for you might not work for someone else, right? So
Yes.
just go in with an open mind about how you approach this, because one of the final takeaways from this, or the last takeaway I'll give from this white paper, was that it's still so difficult to define clear KPIs that will help talent intelligence projects moving forward, right? So just don't let someone just tell you this is the problem and this is how you solve it, right? Say, no, look, you give me the problem and then I will go and
Yeah.
explore what ways there are to potentially solve it.
And honestly, any TA professional or HR professional who goes to the business people or management people with this mindset will be a superhero, because it's still very rare. You don't see it very often because yes, it's a bit more work, but once you start doing it, you get used to it, and business people will make your life easier. So the time you spend, improving your work on talent intelligence will help you spend less time trying to gain the trust of internal stakeholders, because
Exactly.
like you mentioned, it's an advisor position. Well, that when you are seen as an advisor position, you are the internal consultant, and people will say, yeah, you know what you're doing, this is your field, so we trust your judgment.
Exactly.
This is a really good tool
Yeah,
for TA professionals.
exactly. And just going back to your point about what people can do, just once you've defined that one metric, okay, my challenge, okay, I have a challenge for you, right? If you're interested in talent intelligence and you are not already an absolute pro, okay, if you're an absolute pro, you're going to be well advanced on
If
this.
you're an absolute pro, we want to talk to you because
Exactly. Get in touch. Get
we,
in touch
we
with
need
us.
we need to discuss this
Yeah,
topic.
just get in touch on LinkedIn or get in touch by just emailing info@getpressage.com. Okay.
Yeah, and
And
and just hold on a minute. While we say that, if you're watching this video, this topic is of interest to you, we are gonna invite people. I know that you already have your podcast, great podcast, by the way, John.
yeah,
So we will put the link as well. But we would like some people to discuss the talent intelligence topic during this
specifically, yeah, we want to
coffee
bring
break. So just
experts
get
on.
in touch if you're interested
Exactly.
about this.
So
Okay,
the challenge to you
challenge.
is, right? The challenge. And you're new to this. Define one problem, okay, that you wanna work on. Pick one KPI that's relative to this.
Yes.
Take a Google Sheet or Excel or pen and paper, whichever one you want, and just track over each week or each month or each day that you want to do, and create a little graph and just track something over time to see how that works, right? And then start to do things that potentially could affect that graph, right? So do an action and see what effect it has on that graph over time. Okay. So I'm not giving you the metric. I'm not giving you the metric. That's going to be down to you to pick which one you want to try. But I would love for you to give that a go, right? Do it for the next month. Anybody that does do it, please let us know. I'd love to follow some of these little experiments. And I think that comes back to something else that we will probably do is when we find a minute, we'll probably start to track some market data, and maybe we can start to talk about it inside the chat. I think that could be quite a cool
Yes,
thing to do.
it would be super cool, and we might soon like start focusing one of these talk on a specific KPI or specific metrics, like what's it good for, how can we track it, what are the things that we need to be aware of that can be problematic when tracking it. So
maybe pick one specific problem. One specific problem, and then we'll look at what numbers we need to follow to
exactly
see.
getting very operational and give you a lot of insights and actionable inputs that you can use to get started in talent intelligence or to get better, because again, most of you are already doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
You
just don't realize. Not 9 times out of 10, you just don't realize that you're already doing this, and you're probably doing great. But just give yourself a little pat on the back and go, right, you are doing more than you realize. So yeah, I think that the main takeaway from me from since last week and the calls and conversations I've had really is just start somewhere. Just start somewhere.
That's an excellent tip. To
stop talking about it and do it. Really, I spoke to an absolutely amazing lady called Siobhan, and she works at HMRC, which is the Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, okay, which is like the tax collecting big part of the UK government. And she is working on how to implement AI into recruitment processes. And because she's also in the Royal Military Police for the army part-time, she just says, it's all about being brave. It's all about failing. It's all about just trying, and you're not going to learn unless you try, right? You could talk about it until you're blue in the face, but if without action, you're never going to learn. You can talk about it and be an expert on the topic without ever doing it, but just give it a go.
That's an excellent tip. And if I may add, if you, with everything that John just said, if you still are afraid to fail, well, if you don't track your data, you won't know when you're about to fail. So starting tracking it is still a good way to start.
Exactly. So I think that's coming up to a natural time to say
yes.
Thank you. That one flew by.
Yes, very interesting talk. Like always, thank you for your time, John. Thanks everybody who came and watched us talk about these different topics. We are very excited to be able to do it like with you and not just John and I in our private talks, which are also, there are a lot of them, just so you know.
And that's it. If you are interested in this stuff, please reach out and connect. Please follow us, follow the Pressage page, which we'll be sharing as well. So after this, we'll put a bunch of links in and click on what you like. But yeah, if you could just subscribe and follow us, it would be really appreciated, because then we can be sure that we're getting the feedback we need to keep making it better and better. Okay, because we are going to fail in this many times until we get the right formula. But we can't do that without feedback, and we're completely open. So we need your help.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Have a great Tuesday. Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye bye.